Alright, so I've got to be very careful on the tip here. I should have gotten up to stretch or whatever so that I can be very focused on this, but I skipped that. I skipped it because I don't even know if I'll be able to get an arrowhead out of this. Yeah, it shouldn't be too bad. You can kind of tell where it's going to go with the tip work. If the tip snaps off really, really easily, it's not going to go well. At least in my experience. This doesn't seem too bad. So I'm being very careful now with each platform, each flake, as I'm getting closer to finishing. Even when I'm careful, I do stuff like this. But you can get step fractures with being careful or not being careful. So it's hard to tell if you're looking at an artifact and there's a step fracture in the middle. It's not necessarily that the napper was being careless. I applied very careful pressure on that one, and it still stepped right there. Very careful platform preparation, and then looked at the contour of the whole thing. It should have gone, but the material itself is very snappy. It'll snap, so that flake snapped. It didn't carry all the way. I'm gonna have to put more force in it, into these flake removals, so that those flakes can carry. It leaves quite a substantial bulb if you use a lot of force. In most cases. So there's that too. I think I'll be able to deal with that step a little bit later. Step fracture. Or I'll just leave it in there. Sometimes these flakes will fan out, and that one unfortunately did not fan out in this direction. It fanned out in that direction. I may be able to just pick that one. Now this is a pretty small point to be concerned about all those step fractures. See how small that is? To be concerned with each and every flake and each and every bad spot. But I think it'll pay off. You know, with such a small arrowhead, it really doesn't matter how thick it is, it'll still penetrate the same. It's not going to make it any better. as far as the end result, it might be better for hafting. As far as effectiveness in making a wound, it doesn't need to be real thin. Unless you want it intentionally, unless you intentionally want it to break, there's really no need to make them extremely thin. I've seen theories that say that a broken arrowhead causes more damage in the wound than an intact arrowhead or intact projectile point. I don't know how true that is, and it's very might not even be ethical to test that hypothesis. I don't know how ethical it would be to shoot a deer with an arrowhead that you know will break up. Well, that caused an overshot. It hit that lump in the middle, and this little area right there, this little area was substantial enough so that the flake carried. Right, let's see. How did I get that overshot? Looks like it came across here. Narrow flake. And popped that other edge off. Still usable. It's just going to be narrow. I'm not going to go much thinner on it unless it happens by chance. Okay, as I'm shaping it. Yeah, just a little narrow flake. Took off that big area. Well, that's because I had a lot of inward pressure. Okay. Copper would certainly be better at this stage. The steel is not gripping the edge at all. And I don't want to abrade it because we're near the final stage. Now, could I have ended up with a larger or wider point if I was more careful in the beginning with the preform? Well, as you can see, it was an overshot that took off a lot of that edge unnecessarily. Now, if I did not have a lump in the middle, would that overshot have happened? That's a good question. It probably would have, yes. I still would have put a good amount of pressure. It may not have taken as much of the edge off, but it might have taken off a little, still making it more narrow. You know, it might have not have been as wide of an overshot. It might have been a smaller one, but it could have still taken off the same amount of width, just not as wide as this one. Although the more wide it is, the more chance it is it's going to take off more width, obviously. Just geometry. But some overshots dish out a very deep scoop out. Some don't. Oops. So you guys that wanted me to map this material, I would say it's going to be rough going for anything thin. You'll need to compensate for the brittleness by making a thicker point than you normally would, or that you would like. Now, if you're finding artifacts of this material that are extremely thin, that means the napper was very skilled or took a lot of time. Or picked very nice pieces to nap, very consistent material, so that the preforms and all the way down to the end was very consistent as far as the material goes, without ash pockets and so forth. And using probably the best antler or whatever he had on hand. I've heard you can use teeth to nap arrowheads. I've tried it before. I've tried coyote teeth and they snap. They're about the same amount of brittleness as this stuff here. Teeth will snap right off. You know, I've chipped my teeth with very little effort. So you can imagine trying to use a tooth to nap with. It'll snap. So I think antler was the predominant material, unless they had what they called native copper, or copper you find in rivers or something, somewhere on the surface. That's called native copper. You don't have to mine it. If you're mining it, which the Native Americans did, you'll find more of it usually, and the culture will be using more of it, either because they know of a place to mine it, or they're mining it on purpose because they want a lot of it. In any case, I don't know if that's called native copper when it's mined, but native copper was available. I took off that that barb there with a careless flake. So copper would be much better than steel with this stuff. So I'm feeling a lot of slipping with the steel. All right. I think I can get that little island off of there with a couple of nice flakes from the side here. Now, is it better to use the tip of the flaker to create a platform, or is it better to use an abrader? Sometimes I think it's better to use the tip of the flaker because you can actually feel if that platform is ready. With an abrader, you kind of just guess. Yeah, I took off the other side with an overshot mat. But it looks almost symmetrical, right? But yeah, I took a powerful flake and it overshot. Alright, so it's getting more and more narrow. So now I'm intentionally not putting as much pressure. And I don't care if I get little steps in the middle. I don't want those flakes to travel over that ridge. Okay. So there's a basic shape. Now I just need to put notches on it and do the final shape. I was kind of hoping to have room to do some serrations, but I'll have to do the serrations on the next one. I'm taking risks with the tip here. I want that tip thinned down. I don't want to overshoot across the tip, but I do want it nice and thin. This responds really well to being abraded by the tip of the pressure flaker. You know, going back and forth, scraping the edge. Yeah, I probably should have done more of that type of platform preparation with just the tip of the flaker, just scraping it back and forth to create a platform. Seems to be working well. Okay, size comparison to the blue one. They keep getting smaller. I think the width is very similar. Well, let's see. The blue one is substantially wider. Let's see. I would say about a 1/16 wider. And it's substantial at this scale. Now, different factors of why they got smaller and smaller. The material size, I'm limited by the bottle bottom on that one, but material quality is also lower. And I would say this is the lowest quality so far. Although I know I can make one this length with that. With this material, it just would require a much bigger preform. Now, this is perfectly usable as is. Just like this, it can be mounted to an arrow. And I looked up some California arrows, and I think Cottonwood Triangle is one of the ones that is on the list for California or Oregon. Or just regular triangular shape arrowheads like this were pretty common. But I am going to notch it. I think I have enough time to notch this one. Let's see. I'm going to put a different kind of notch than the other two. Notch it a little bit differently than the other two. It's going to be a wider notch. And up a lot higher on the blade. So hoping that lighting is okay. I'm hoping you can see that. This wider notch allows me to do a little bit of thinning on the, or in the middle. It'll thin it out a little bit with a wider notch like this. I don't want to be too adventurous. if you had a lump right there where the notches are going to be, you can eliminate that lump by doing this type of wide notch. I blew off some of the edges. Well, I did a substantial amount of accidental removal of the edge of these notches. These pop outs tend to wrap around really easily and take off some of the edge. On this material. Okay, I'm just going to leave that white and powdery there. I don't want to risk snapping it across the notches. Okay. I don't want to try to drive that notch any deeper to get rid of that white powdery look. I'm having trouble seeing that edge, so haven't been working on the very, very tip. But I can kind of see it now. Okay. Okay, I'm out of time, so that's it. I'll stop messing with it. I think there's a name for this type, but I don't know what it is. I forget. So there you go. Silver sheen is not too bad, but I think something like triple flow would be better. Okay.